tonight's program, Cambridge is Vital Cities Have Vital Arts, our art spaces lost and found, will feature Jason Weeks, the Executive Director of Cambridge Arts, Sal Zeno, the Vice President of Development for Biomed Realty, Amy Green Dines, Dean of Lesley College's School of Art and Design, and our own Cambridge Club member, Michael Monestein, formerly of the Central Square Bid, and now in business strategy and development for the Morningside Group. Our first three panelists will speak for 10 minutes, and then Michael will speak for 5 minutes. Then we'll have Q&A. Please hold off and ask questions at the end. We are eagerly awaiting your questions. So Jason, please launch us.
Kathy, thank you so much. And welcome to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm grateful to all of the club members, but also Kathy for reaching out and brainstorming a little bit about what a valuable topic might be. So I'm really grateful that the group has taken up this topic of arts and cultural space, because it's never been more critical, I think, in Cambridge. We talked in our breakout group, our cocktail group, for the first 30 minutes about so many wonderful places we know, we remember, that may still be with us, some are not still with us. And we have seen how Cambridge has changed over the last 25 to 30 years in particular, when it comes to not just housing stock and how things look and work and operate in our neighborhoods, but also within our business districts and civic spaces. And so it's such an important topic. And so I wanted to share a little bit of insight from the city perspective, because that's where I sit from my perch with Cambridge Arts as the arts department for the city of Cambridge, and also give the city a great deal of gratitude. I know the city usually takes a beating for just about every bad thing that ever happens in Cambridge, but I also want to hold up and say that the city, through collaboration, through partnership, and through negotiation, has been one of the great organizations that has made sure that many of our spaces have stayed with us and have stayed resilient. And while we can't wrap our arms as a city around every single space all by ourselves as the municipality, it requires partnership. And so we're going to hear about that tonight too, with Amy and Sal and Mike from their respective positions and perches, with our universities, with our development community, and in Mike's case with the Central Square Bid. And so anyway, with regards to the city, I mean, space is always complicated. I think everybody on this call knows how critical it is. And many of you have been directly involved with the development of spaces, bringing spaces online, the lifetime of a space, the loss of a space. It's just such a complicated topic in Cambridge, because we are only 6.3 square miles. And we only have so much geography to work with. And we know living and working in Cambridge is as expensive as can possibly be. And so with all of those pressures, what do? How do we hold on to spaces? We've been very fortunate in Cambridge, I think, for decades and decades to have our faith communities and our communities of worship that tend to open their doors and make space available to artists and makers and creatives. We also blessedly have our universities, who have also opened their doors and campuses to residents, to folks that work in Cambridge, and certainly to the broader audiences. So with all of that, there is great and good news, but I wanted to focus on 3 quick examples. Hopefully they're examples you're all familiar with, where the city has actually played a critical role in making sure that arts and cultural space stayed in our midst and stayed present and resilient. And then, of course, like I said, you'll hear from the other panelists about opportunities they've had with the Biomed and 585 Arts, with Lesley University and Lesley Art and Design, which we're so grateful for. And from Mike, even thinking about temporary and long-term temporary civic spaces like Starlight Square. So anyway, it should be a great conversation, and I really appreciate the club taking this up. But the first one I wanted to share has to do with the Multicultural Arts Center. Sorry, my chair dropped. You saw me get shorter all of a sudden. But the Multicultural Arts Center, I think everybody on this call has been there, has done events there, has been a patron over the years. But when it was originally developed as part of the redevelopment of the Bullfinch properties in the courthouse, it was, on the edge of the earth as far as Cambridge is concerned. And so it was an opportunity to have an outpost, an outpost where we could bring communities and audiences together and we could learn from one another. We know Cambridge is a community made up of immigrants. And it was an opportunity to shed light on the work that they were doing creatively and to bring broader audiences to that. And they've been doing that since 1978, and specifically in the building where they are at 41 2nd Street since 1985, or I think actually 84. We partner with them quite a bit on programming and that sort of thing. But the thing that a lot of folks may not know is the city, years ago under city manager Bob Healy, and when Michael Sullivan was mayor, I believe for the first time, there was a crisis because the tax incentive that had long supported the Multicultural Arts Center with operating support from the larger property ran out. And so there was a huge crisis. That was the organization going to have to close? Could they make up that difference? And so we negotiated and worked very closely with the board. It's a private board and the executive leadership at the time to actually negotiate the city stepping in and taking over what that tax incentive was financially. And so every single year through our Arts Council and Public Celebrations budget, we support that organization with almost $250,000 to make sure that they can still engage audiences, they can still bring in the artists and the creatives that they celebrate from their theater and from their galleries, and so that they can continue to partner with the community. But that absolutely would not have happened, and very likely they would have been diminished as an organization had the city not stepped in and done that negotiation and worked with them. Some folks on this call may also know that connects to a much more nuanced relationship with Oddfellows Hall and the dance complex. When Joy of Movement first started way back in Central Square, they didn't own that space. They worked out of the Oddfellows Hall space right on Mass Ave, but they didn't own it, and it needed to live somewhere. And so it actually lived under the umbrella of the Multicultural Arts Center nonprofit. And so that was in place for many, many years, up until we came to a point where, it just wasn't working in the way that it should and needed to work. And so again, the city stepped in and negotiated the proverbial, sale for $1 of this Oddfellows Hall to modern day and present time dance complex. So they're one of the few arts organizations in the city of Cambridge that actually own their building and can make decisions about that building for now and into perpetuity because they have that kind of power and that ownership opportunity. So, there's a really interesting relationship between the Multicultural Arts Center, Joy of Movement, and later Dance Complex, and the role that the city played in negotiating the successful continuation of those organizations. I also want to bring up a second example, and that's up on Lowell Street, across from the main entrance of the Mount Auburn Hospital. And everybody's familiar with the little yellow house on the property there, Lowell Street Park. That is the home, I hope, as everybody on the call knows, of the Cambridge Art Association and the New School of Music. Well, the city owns that property. We lease that property to those organizations, at a sub-market rate, and make sure that they can continue to serve the hundreds and thousands of folks that have benefited from the programs that occur in both of those spaces. Musical programs, of course, practice, learning, teaching, and presentation. And of course, with Cambridge Art Association, all of the great work and support and community that visual artists receive as part of being, members of that. And in more recent years, they've changed their whole structure so that their membership is actually not a paid membership anymore. So they've removed some of the barriers for participation. But, arguably those organizations could have been shuttered or also been diminished if they weren't operating out of a property that the city owns and the city is not taking away, into the future. So the third example I want to give is Maud Morgan Arts. And I saw my good friend Fran Cronin and so many others that have been, right at the base of the development of that organization at 28 Sacramento Street as part of the Baldwin community, formerly Agassiz Baldwin community. And, that is a really interesting space. I hope everybody's been to it, been in it, maybe taken a class, benefited from all of the work that happens in that space. But that also could not have happened without the role of the city, financially, as a negotiator, legally. There were so many ways that the city, through the Arts Council, both with funding, with the capital campaigns, with exhibitions that we did to build audience and bring dollars to the table, just on and on, so many different ways. And of course, the deep connections between our out of time learning and after school programs at the Baldwin School and many other schools around the city now who come to that campus to learn from the professional artists and be in conversation about how to make art, how to create the work. And so, I mean, again, there's another space that would not be with us. I remember when I started with the city 23 years ago, I would get calls on the weekly. Where can I take my student, my young person to learn about the arts? You know, and at that time, I couldn't send them over to, I saw Mary Catherine, I couldn't send them to the Cambridge Center for Adult Education because, of course, that's adult learning. There was not a good place to send them in out of school time. And now we have a partner like Maud Morgan Arts to be able to fill that gap. And so, you know, those are three examples, like I said, that are just literally built on negotiation, ownership, and partnership. But I also wanted to bring up the Foundry Redevelopment Project and the Cambridge Foundry. You know, the city has committed in excess of $40 million to rehab and renovate fully this space that was gifted by one of the developers in East Cambridge to the city. And it was a long, long conversation. Many of you will shake your heads and roll your eyes, a very long conversation as to what would happen in that space over time. And gratefully, the community gathered around and said, we want and demand arts and cultural use from that space. And so while it will have some market rate, you know, lab space and that sort of thing on the upper floor, the large majority of the space is given over to arts and cultural space and opportunities, both inside and outside, for workshops, for creation, for any number of things. That might be my time that just clicked. I'll wrap that piece up, but I just wanted to say, you know, while we do, you know, wring our hands about the loss of spaces like Green Street Studios and Ryles and other places like the EMF Sound Museum and space right outside of Central Square for musicians, we are also seeing spaces come online, you know, and we'll hear about that from Sal and from Amy and from Michael. And so I think, you know, it's a balance, but I'll just end by saying that I think the critical thing is that we're having conversations like this, not just here, but we're having conversations like this with city executive administration. We're having conversations like this with our city council and the folks that have control over policy, so we can think about zoning and all of those other things. And so I have some resources that we provide as a city that are provided by the state and others that I'll share with Kathy, and she can share back out as part of the notes to the meeting, or some of that may come up in the Q&A later. But you know, I came here to tell good news about what the city's doing and good news about what the city has done in partnership with so many organizations. And so with that, I'll yield and be happy to answer questions later.
Jason, thank you so much. And thanks for your longtime leadership of the arts in Cambridge. We're very lucky to have you. We're also lucky to have Sal Zeno speaking with us today. I told Sal, who was in my breakout room, that I would embarrass him by telling him that I learned that he is he was named in February 22, one of Boston Business Journal's Power 50. So we're very lucky that we have this powerful force for the good creating art spaces in Cambridge. Sal.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, for listening to me. Kathy was successful in embarrassing me. I just feel like I shouldn't have been on the list, but I appreciated it. So I did bring some slides today, and I realized that I only had 10 minutes, but I thought, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words, and I'll flip through some of them. But I think I had to pause and kind of think about the long road that we've had with this project, 585 3rd Street, as we're calling it now here in Kendall Square, and remind myself that not everyone's familiar with it. Not everyone's as focused on Kendall Square as I am. So I wanted to give everybody, you know, kind of so that you're able to get your bearings. There's a lot of people that knew this site or know this site because it's across the street from the ex-Genzyme building in Kendall Square, or next to the community ice skating rink in Kendall Square, which we actually have operated and managed for quite some time now. The entire that gravel lot in the middle of the site, the hole in the donut, as everyone has called it, right off of 3rd Street, is actually the location that we are planning this lab building in combination of theater and public space. So some of you may also know the site because as you walk down 3rd Street, there's an Eversource gas transfer station there that's been there for a long time. The city has long advocated for that to be relocated, and we've actually been able to find an alternative location for that facility. We're in the process of moving it as we speak. And once that is out of the way, that will pave the way to allow us to develop this combination of lab, art space, public space. The theater itself has grown a bit over time. It's right now in the 360 seat range. It spans the second and third floors of the building, and then there's also a 17,000 square foot ground floor public space. So I'm going to share slides and just quickly flip through them, and then forward to diving into questions later on. So this is the site. This is a view of the site from the perspective of someone standing on the existing ice rink, the Tamir Square, as we call it. Flipping through a little bit, I think what really makes this site interesting, with the building interesting, is the amount of open space that we have surrounding the building, as well as the permeability of the ground floor space. You can see sort of on the lower end of this image, there's the 17,000 square foot ground floor space that spans from 3rd Street and continues along the bottom of the building, and then opens up into this winter garden and small scale performance space on the east side, or the right side of the site. The idea there is that one of the things that we heard from the community throughout the process, the whole process of planning this building, was that there's a desire to have a space to meet, that was free, that wasn't influenced by this commercial presence, by a security desk or anything like that. So this is completely separate from the commercial lobby in the building. And this winter garden and performance space on the east has sort of evolved and gotten a bit larger than I ever anticipated. But this space on the ground floor is intended to accommodate more casual events. I originally thought that it was going to be an ideal place for indoor movie nights, but it's going to be a lot more than that. It seats about 110 to 120 people. And you can see that's, again, just kind of so everyone can get their bearings. 3rd Street on the left over there. It's just a stone's throw from Main, between Main and Binney. So just going to flip through, and this is a view of the future building, standing near Main and 3rd, looking at the site where the gas transfer station is today. Another view of the building from the southeast, an evening view, and what you're looking at on the lower level of the building, there's that glazing that spans 3 stories. That's actually the theater space within there. And the theater itself spans the 2nd and 3rd floors of the building. It's above the public space and that small scale sort of casual performance space. This is a view of the from 3rd Street, standing across 3rd Street, looking at the building and where the gas transfer station is today. On the left, you're going to have an entrance to the commercial lobby, and then on the right is the entrance to the public space. We're still in the process of planning that, but you'll see a few representative images of what we think can happen in that space. So this is a view of, again, it's sort of midway on the south side of the building. You're entering into the ground floor public space. The idea is that you'd walk in there, you'd have an opportunity to get a coffee, to go to the right, potentially have a drink. We're planning the early stages of planning food service aspects of the space. But and then right in front, as you walk in, there will be a ticket booth. You'll see later. Then you walk to the right and continue upstairs to the theater. So this is a view. The east side of the building. This is with your back toward the Genzyme building, the ex-Genzyme building, or 500 Kendall, and you're looking into this 3-story space with the theater above, spanning the 2nd and 3rd floors. So it's a bit like the ICA theater in terms of the scale and the fact that it has, glass behind the theater, or excuse me, behind the stage. This is just another shot of the 3rd Street commercial side of the building. And then again, I thought it was, it's interesting. We thought a lot about the space, the outdoor space surrounding the building. We purposefully did not build to the lot lines, so it gives us a lot of opportunity to create some spaces for people to hang out, for people to play, children sit, have lunch, maybe even small scale performances. But that's this space surrounding the building. And this is just, we're zooming in here on that 17,000 square feet of ground floor public space. You could see point E is where you'd enter into the theater. You'd go to the right and you'd go upstairs and the grand staircase there to the 2nd and 3rd floor, or you'd go to the left. We're thinking about having that space host some retail, seating, be a place where people have an opportunity to maybe take an art class, to hang art. We're thinking a lot about the space and how to make it better. I think, it's an interesting space. The length of it makes it a little bit complicated to program, but it's a large space. So we need to think about how to fill up all of these different spaces and how to keep it active. I think the winter garden on the east side is really going to be neat. We were talking a little bit about the plantings that we're going to have in there. It's going to be, the goal is to have it be very lush. So this is another shot. This is the entrance to the public space from 3rd Street. 585 Arts is what we've been calling it. I expect that may evolve, but maybe not. And this is a view looking into that ground floor public space from 3rd Street. And then another example of what could happen in that space. This is one where we have an indoor winter market set up, indoor farmers market. Again, I think thinking about this early on and realizing that there's a lot of things to do when the weather is pleasant, but fewer things to do in Kendall when the weather is not so pleasant. So this lends itself to this sort of activation. It's just another shot looking toward the stair, heads up to the theater. And sorry if we do this stuff too quickly, but I know somebody's watching the time. And then this is that ground floor, smaller scale, sort of casual performance space. And these are, I stuck them in here in the appendix, but these are two shots, two plans of the theater, which spans the 2nd and 3rd floor. I thought some people might be interested in getting a little bit into the details. But so going back to the process, this site, we acquired the site in 2018, and it was actually slated to be some sort of arts and culture, always slated to be home to some sort of arts and culture use. Who was owned by a guy of the name Glenn Nicker, who had a plan to build a world-renowned performing arts center here. So when we acquired this site in 2018, the first thing that we did was committed to meeting the expectation that the community had of there being some arts and culture space. At that point, it was natural for everyone to start to ask, well, what does that mean? Should we be skeptical? What are you going to deliver? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be different? Everybody had a lot of ideas. The space had sat vacant, empty, the site rather, for 15 years. So I think there was, a lot of time for people to think about what they wanted there. So we spent quite a bit of time. It all started out with the Mayor's Arts Task Force, actually, which was ideally timed to start around the same time that we acquired this site. And it gave me, a lot of insight into what the city and the community wanted. Jason and Gita and Peter Demure and everyone there, and Alana, have been extremely helpful throughout the process. I think guiding us and helping us understand what it was that the community wanted. I think the thing that's been really appreciative, that I've been really appreciative here of, is that, when you go through a process of modifying the zoning for a site, I think sometimes the community benefits tend to be a little bit more widespread. And we were fortunate here in that the community and the city and everyone here agreed that the focus should be on the arts. So I think we've been able to create something that I think is pretty exciting. And it's not just the space that is going to be unique. I think it's, we think a lot about the operational model and how to ensure that this space is going to be sustainable, affordable, lend itself to a diverse range of users and visitors and performers. So there's a lot more to it than just, the space, the plans, the seats. The operational model was something that we realized that we had to think through to make sure that this space was going to be viable for the long term. So we're getting there. We're actually, we got through the special permit with the planning board in January, and we hope to be able to break ground on the building later this summer. It's going to take a few years to deliver. Expect it won't be ready until mid-25 or so. But everything's going well. We've partnered with Global Arts Live to create a nonprofit that's going to run and operate the theater, and it's been an amazing project to work on. And again, I think the city and the community have been very supportive. Certainly challenged us in some of our thoughts. We've come to a great point, and I'm thankful to have the opportunity to work on a project like this. I really think that it may be a once in a lifetime type of project. I hope not, but if it is, I'm fine with that. It's incredible. So I think that's it. I hope we provided enough of a summary, not too much detail, and everybody has an idea of what this project is about. We look forward to answering questions. later on. And thank you again, Kathy, and everyone else for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Sal. Very, very exciting. Our next speaker is Amy Green Dines from Leslie College. We're very lucky to have Amy with us. She came to Cambridge in 2019, just in time for COVID, poor thing, and had come having done extraordinary things in Detroit at Cranbrook. Anyway, she will share some of her accomplishments in Michigan and her hopes and dreams for projects here in Cambridge. Amy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to engage in this really important conversation. And in particular, for someone, as Kathy just mentioned, have not had a lot of opportunity to meet my colleagues and other people that are as passionate about art spaces and art in communities as myself. So I really appreciate the time with you tonight. I have a lot of slides, so we're going to jump into them. Buckle up. It's going to be a quick ride. I'm going to start with my story from Detroit. I wanted to grab your attention with this giant 100%. Through a lot of my scholarship and research as an academic as well as a dean, I have really found through all the data that art and design public spaces increases health, pleasure, curiosity, and financial investment 100%. No doubt about that. You can keep moving. So, some of the research I was doing in Detroit, and of course, Detroit is a completely different context than Cambridge, but there are some similarities that I've found since I've been here. One of the things that I was trying to do in all of my roles, whether it was at Cranbrook or at Lawrence Technological University, was to connect students and educators to understand the role of art and design, not only as it gives a student agency and a voice to discuss what's important about their own practice, but also it causes a lot of great investment and job creation, particularly in Detroit, areas that had programming around art and design institutions, decreased crime, increased health and wellness, increased and improved mental and physical health. That excerpt, by the way, you don't have to go back, was from a grant that I wrote. You can keep going. A grant that I wrote in anticipation of the development of a new center for Detroit Center for Design and Technology. So I'm just going to quickly tell you about some of the work that I've done in Detroit, and then we'll fast forward to Cambridge. So I'll underscore the fact that the Academy, universities that are offering colleges education on art and design and architecture, it's really important for students to understand their voice, their role, and their agency, and specifically in areas like Cambridge, and finding those sweet spots and those cracks in the sidewalk that allow them to have a voice and contribute to the larger fabric. So one of the projects that I was working on simultaneously to the Detroit Center development was writing a book chapter with 10 of my colleagues. We're all architects, designers, artists, and we're all professors who really were dedicated to the role of experimental pedagogy as it relates to development of cities. And I'll talk a little bit about the Design Center, and then I will quickly take stock of some of the art spaces that MIT offers and Harvard as well, and then I'll summarize Leslie. So quickly, the graphic to the right is a map of the city of Detroit. That's Detroit proper, and the darker line on the edge. All of the contributors to this book had specific projects that we utilized in collaboration with our students as a result of this dedication to getting students outside of the insular wall of the Academy and really working with communities, working with local art galleries, doing pop-up galleries. And so all those little black dots that you see are examples of myself and my colleagues who have done really meaningful work in the city as a result of being in the role of a professor, which is such a noble profession. So quickly, I had a lot of traction around this. It became very clear to me that foundations, business constituents and stakeholders, industry partners were really passionate about supporting financially students being able to practice in a city like Detroit. And so, you know, I was offered a lot of great press and an opportunity to talk about my story and how it's important, again, to connect the dots of students who are in the university landscape, but having the opportunity simultaneously to have a voice within their community, especially around, let's say, a city like Detroit that is, you know, it's very messy, it's very complex, and that's a perfect environment for a student to consider what their role is in that larger context. So it took about 3 years. I'll quickly tell you the story. I went to the president of Lawrence Tech at the time and some colleagues at Cranbrook and said, I really want to have an academic studio, a research center, a storefront gallery in the city of Detroit where many institutions can come together and develop curricula around art and design, around urban issues, around equity, social justice, inclusion. And so this is just a picture of me and some of my students from Denby High School. I taught a pre-college design program to 11th and 12th graders. And we got out in the city and we did a lot of tours and talked about the context of the fabric they're living within and what kind of power and control they have as artists to make a difference. I'm not advancing my slides just so you guys don't. It's we're collaborating right now. So this is the building. It's at the corner of Woodward and Willis. Woodward is similar to Mass Ave. It was the last developed parcel on Woodward Avenue. I raised about $1.2 million to sell. You know, I'm glad that I'm going to have some conversation with you. I worked with developers in the city. I started to negotiate subtenant leases. I mean, I was wearing so many hats. I was professor, executive director, associate dean, and developer. And as a result, we have 8,000 square feet, a storefront gallery, a very large conference room that is shared with the subtenants, a design incubator, and all these programs were aggregates that were connected to foundations. And what I found was the more I told a story about learning outcomes for students, to have the reality of making an impact around art and social spaces, there was not any, it wasn't a hard sell. I mean, it was really easy to raise the money and find the capacity to build this project. You know, I raised $300,000 for a design incubator, which would take 5 of our graduates after graduation. They would submit a proposal for a small design or art startup. They'd be provided a seed grant. They would have a space in this building. They would be provided with a design, an art mentor, and a business coach to help develop their business model and their business plan. Additionally, that building being located in downtown Detroit increased my enrollment with Canadian students because we were so close to the border. So now it became an international investment, not only for the business owners, but for the academies in Windsor and of course in Detroit. So the storefront gallery, which I thought was really great, was funded by the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan. And when you start to work with foundations, what I realized is that I had a very specific agenda that I wanted this gallery to serve. But when you meet with the foundation officer, they talk about their vision and their mission, and then you start to meld these two ideas together. And as a result, the funding for this came from that foundation, and 30% of the budget had to go back towards the community, specifically around workshops that community members were interested in pursuing, like website development, business cards, resumes. So it really became a beautiful co-created space between the folks that lived right there in Detroit with students and with faculty. This is another piece of it where we had a lot of exhibitions where we brought the community into the building, into the studios to talk to students in a more intimate way about what they were working on. And you know, these events would last 5 hours. We'd have over 500 people come through our studio. to just discuss what students were thinking about. How do they see a city unfolding? Where do they see areas for sustainability? Where do they see areas to invest in more of the single family home landscape in Detroit? So it was a really enriching experience for me, not only as a faculty member, but also as associate dean. And I'm not going to apologize, but I didn't have a lot of time to do a real deep dive into Harvard. I mean, I have colleagues who teach there and, friends with some of the deans. My quick read, or my quick kind of synopsis to this group is that I think every institution in Cambridge is very tenacious and dedicated to having public art spaces for community, for students and for faculty. My critique is that they're very insular. If you're not from here, it's not front and center. They're not necessarily in wide open public spaces. And I'm talking about the museums that you're seeing on this list. There's other pieces within MIT where they map out all their public artwork, which is outside. What I would love about this exercise is that it really allowed me to think about all the intersections between what we're doing at Lesley, what MIT's doing, and what Harvard's doing. And in collaboration with someone like Sal, Jason, and Mike, how could we find those intersections and maximize all of our resources? Just a couple images from the Carpenter Center and their public programming, which is a lot around lectures and some cinema, some filmmakers. And again, there's this absolute passion and desire that I know all of these institutions, including Lesley, have to reach out to the community. I do think we have to do a better job. This is in Boston, so I'm outside of Cambridge, but I did appreciate the business plan and the pedagogical positioning of this art lab space, which is a part of the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. And it's specific for the development of faculty. There's an artist residency program. And of course, students have ease of access. I do think sometimes there's a moment within university campuses that sometimes it's interesting to extract and drop a program somewhere else to allow it to have some life and its own legs and its own DNA, which is what I would argue I did with the Design Center in Detroit. I love the MIT List Visual Arts Center. I've been to many of their exhibitions. I think it's open to the public. I think that their exhibitions are diverse and there's a great cross section of mediums. And I think that's part of it. But then that public piece is something that I think they're doing a great job, at least with having a public art map on their website. If you want to go to the next slide. Oh, a little quote from the MIT president, which I thought was great. I mean, I completely prescribe to this philosophy. And I think it's important for us as educators to support that. Thank you. So this is the map, and all of those pink spots have specific artist work that's accessible by foot. And I think this would be amazing to work on, Jason, to have this massive map that, there's Cambridge, or maybe some of our partners that are outside of Cambridge, where you could have an app or you could hover over it. It would give you the quick synopsis of the artists, what their medium is, what is the concept of whatever the public art space is. So I was impressed with this, and I'd love to continue talking about this as an idea. I'm not sure if everyone's been to the London Art Center. If you want to go to the next slide. Excuse me, I'm talking too fast. So this is the Art Center. We had just had our MFA Visual Art exhibition. And because of COVID, we've not been able to do any exhibitions. We've had exhibitions, but you can't access that from the public standpoint, which has been a huge bummer for all of us. But what I love about my community is that we continue to put exhibitions up so people that are walking by can say, Leslie's still open for business. There's still art being produced. They're still passionate, but because of COVID, we can't invite you in. we received great news from our administration that we will be able to have our BFA thesis shows, which is great because we had 2 or 3 years, COVID is such a blur, where we've had online exhibitions and we had a storefront exhibition, but we haven't been able to have the crescendo of a 4-year experience to invite your family, your friends to see your work. And by the way, a lot of students receive job offers at this event. So it's really important for their professional positioning. And of course, it's open to the public. Just an image of one of our shows, Irving Penn. And then quickly, my second semester here, right before COVID hit, I was working with Catherine Shizawa, who's my director of community engagement. Some of you may know her. And I was teaching an environmental design course. And what I try to do in my faculty role is when I want to push my agenda, I try to put it through a studio. And so I thought if I taught an environmental design course, maybe we could do something that's more public facing where students are out in the community. In some ways, they're forced to have critical conversations about what they're thinking about, where do they see their practice, where are they critical, and provide them some agency. So we collaborate with the Culture House, Lesley University College of Art and Design, and we launched a series of pop-up events in the out-of-town news. The studio was called IDEA. The first project right before COVID was called Taste. We had a pop-up soup restaurant, so we had students in design ranging from interaction design, illustration, animation, sociology, and we all worked in a team to basically outfit and build a space. This is just an example. You can see to the left, we had a neon sign artist design, Lesley Art and Design. Again, we outfitted the interior. So there was seating. My students worked with vinyl. They designed custom wallpaper, built benches. And I had the honor of making, I don't know, 50 gallons of homemade soup. And it was a lovely experience. And I'll just say, and again, for I think many of you are from here, this is one of the largest youth homeless community in this area. And I thought, wow, this is interesting because in Detroit, that's pretty common. And in terms of just the intersections between Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, the real estate value, the amount of money that comes through here, I thought that was a little shocking, but it really allowed some critical conversations within my studio with my students and my faculty about the role of artists and designers and art in these types of spaces. Just an action shot. And we used it as a conference room. So we had it for a while. And then once COVID hit, the rest of the programming on that poster that you saw, we had to do remote. And lastly, shout out to my Dean's Community Advisory Council. At our last meeting at the end of last year, I was actually a little emotional. I said, I feel so horrible for my graduates that cannot have an exhibition. And Jason and others, we started brainstorming and, we started talking about the community that Lunder is situated within. So long story short, we started to approach all the business owners and ask them if we could hang basically like a vinyl cling into their windows or doors and allow our students to have an outside walking exhibition with their families, their communities, their partners, and celebrate one another. And it really turned out to be a beautiful project. On each poster, so every graduate from Lesley that year had a poster within one of the business owners, and every business owner said yes. Like there was so much enthusiasm to support students, which I was super grateful for. But each poster has a QR code that would go right back to their website. So if someone was actually interested in this work, they could, contact them through their website, look at their full projects in their entirety. And that's one of my faculty members who was walking along. So Eric Luden, who is one of my advisory members, he paid for all of the clings graciously. So, I think it's a great community that I have arrived at. I am excited to remove the veil of COVID and start to get out there and have conversations about how my students could be involved in some of those art spaces, Sal, and, starting to create conversations like I was having in Detroit. So again, I really am thankful for the opportunity to talk, and I'm sorry that I was talking so fast, but I appreciate your time. Look forward to the conversation.
Amy, thank you so much. And I can't wait to see what you do to Cambridge. It's great to have your energy here.
Kathy, if I could interrupt, Jason has explained that he actually has done a public art map, which I can quickly share on the Cambridge Arts website.
Fantastic.
I did see that, Jason. I did, I guess, and I think that's beautiful. I think we should do even a larger one that has a range of different programs that might be refreshed based on, who's sitting at the table. So if it's Leslie, MIT, Harvard, something that's more diametrically driven in terms of a live feed. So kudos to you. I didn't mean to dismiss that.
Everyone, I think we should move on to Michael Monestein, because I want to make sure there's time for Q&A, because there are going to be great questions out there for you. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And Laura, if you could pull up my slides for me, that'd be greatly appreciated. Similar to Amy, I am going to talk a little fast. Hopefully I can make up for some time to allow for Q&A at the end. While my new role, many of you might know me as the former and founding executive director of the Central Square Business Improvement District, I am now doing strategy and development for Morningside. And while I don't have big announcements to make on 10 Church Street and the Harvard Square movie theater, I do hope that Kathy and the Cambridge Club will allow me back sometime in the future to hopefully share some good news. I did just want to use a few minutes today to talk about Starlight Square, our square within the square. It was a pre-pandemic idea that happened around the time of the formation of the bid, meeting with Flag Street Studios, Mark Boyes-Watson, Matthew Boyes-Watson, and Nina Berg. But the square within a square has been an idea many years in the making, and we stand on the shoulders of the Red Ribbon Commission, the good thinking in C2K2 and Envision Cambridge. And to believe that we met with the Special Events Committee for the City of Cambridge 3 days prior to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts shutting down due to COVID-19. We retreated back, you can move to the next slide. We retreated back to our planning portal and said we need to build something that meets the scale of the crisis that we're in. Understanding that restaurants were pushing al dente, moving outdoors, everything was happening outside because it was told to us time and time again, it was the safe place to be. You can turn again. And the beauty of Starlight is we've had a chance to be able to pull from the great history of Cambridge, the great history of Central Square, and infuse it into our creative placemaking that is Starlight Square. Next slide. In addition to having a community stage, we also have Popportunity, which has now spun off as its own 501c3. And Popportunity is allowed for 13 small vendors, majority, next slide, BIPOC and female-led, many of whom live in Cambridge and live in such close proximity they can walk to the site, an opportunity to vend and create an economy for themselves. Next slide. In addition to that, we've been working with the Mass Farmers Market Association, who's been our beloved Monday Farmers Market in Central Square for 30 plus years, to expand their footprint to encompass Norfolk Street, for which we have larger goals of one-day pedestrianizing and making more community space in Central Square adjacent to the site. Next slide. And for those of you who don't know, Starlight is located at 84 Bishop Allen Drive, the former municipal parking lot 5. It's a 1 acre site, and the cross streets are Bishop Allen in Norfolk. It truly is a community stage. It's framed to be a spoof building, made out of temporary materials. You can see in the background here, scaffolding and scrim. The site is free and accessible to everyone. And through our efforts, we've fundraised $1.5 million that has kept it a free community space. So presenting artists are paid fee, gig economy fee to present, and there is no ticket to entry. Anyone is welcome to join us and acquire a seat. Next slide. Part of the reason why I'm here today talking about Starlight is because we are actually going in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals, the BZA, next week on March 24th, seeking relief. Starlight was made possible by the city manager because municipalities had been given executive order from the governor allowing and suspending the enforcement of zoning during the COVID-19 emergency. Now that our community and the Commonwealth is emerging from COVID-19, from the emergency status, we now have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to get a special permit so that we can operate Starlight for the next 3 seasons. The only thing that will be changing in this season is a slight reduction in evening live performances and a reduction in the number of speakers that we have in the space. And we're doing this to mitigate some of the concerns we've heard from neighbors. And part of our ask of the BZA is for a 3-year special permit so that Starlight Square can operate till 2025. Over the last 2 seasons, we've hosted over 250 safe shared experiences at the site, from CRLS Senior Prom to this January City Council inauguration to the Bob Moses second line through the Port neighborhood that ended at Starlight Square. We are firm believers that the space delivers on equity, inclusion, and diversity, that it has been spatial justice to the abutting neighborhoods, to allow for community space. It's a labor of love. And for anyone on this call who has participated, we would love to have you back as a guest for season 3. For anyone on the call who is an organizer, whether that's social justice, climate, community events, we do have an open RFP right now where you can send in your submission of how you would love to utilize the space, and we would love to have you. More information can be found at starlightsquare.org. And for anyone who's interested in sending a letter of support to the Board of Zoning Appeals, that would be greatly appreciated. I just dropped all of that information with our BZA case number in the chat. And I promised to talk quickly and keep it short. Thank you for advancing to the last slide. To give the conversation back to you, Kathy. Thank you, and to the Cambridge Club for allowing us an opportunity for a brief update.
Michael, thank you so much for presenting and for bringing Starlight to Central Square. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A. I'm a little hampered because I can't see all of you. Maybe even if you take me off spotlight, I don't know if I can do it, Laura. So if you have a question, maybe you can call out. I know Maggie, you wanted to say something. I know Marion had something she wanted to say. Gita, others?
I have something I want to say. This is Maggie. I don't know how to change any view. Anyway, let me just say that I've been working on a project that I am so excited about, and it's small. It's nothing like Starlight or the big 585 3rd Street, but it's very community based, and that is the St. Augustine's African Orthodox Church. And in addition to all the work that we've been doing with the Cambridge Historical Commission, thank you, Kit, and Charlie Sullivan. Thank you, Kathy, for the work you've done on it. That part of the goal for this is to return this building to the community as a center for arts, including performing arts. And, you know, we're limited only by our imagination and of course by our capacity. But I hope you will all follow us on online as we're about to create a new website that will give you better information. But the St. Augustine's is it's in the heart of Cambridgeport, and it promises to provide a space for us all to enjoy the arts. And it has nice high ceilings so that we can enjoy good ventilation.
Thank you, Maggie. Marion, had you wanted to say something?
Sure, I had begun to, can you hear me?
Yes.
I had shared in the small group, the breakout group that we had in the very beginning, that when we're talking about art in public spaces, that, you know, it is nice when you see art in other establishments like restaurants, and I'm not sure about a CVS, but to see more of that. And so I shared a little bit that Sean Hope, I said my son, but he is Sean Hope, is going to, in a few days, should be opening up Yamba Market, and the place that Harvest was last opened. I can't call it Old Harvest. It's the new Old Harvest that's no longer there, but they're going to have 2 art galleries. So it is, I mean, they are going to be selling cannabis and cannabis products, but it's not just there for that. It's also designed to be a place where people can actually see art. So in the front of it, and they are highlighting artists from both Boston and Cambridge. They have a row of baskets. They're working with a village in Senegal. So there are lots of baskets, and people can buy the baskets if they want, but it's trying to bring art from a number of different places. And they also have a collaboration with the ICA, so that we have some real opportunities. And I'd like to see more of that sort of art as well, where I'm shopping, where I am maybe having tea with somebody, that we can see art, not just in special places, but art everywhere. And I think the beauty of a walking central square that's sort of close is that you can really do that fairly easily. I don't know about banks and large entryways in Central Square where there's retail, why wouldn't we see more art? So just want to raise that.
Thank you, Marion. Gita, you were on the mayor's task force along with Michael and Jason. I just wondered if you wanted to say a few words, and you're doing so much for the arts and with the foundation.
I wanted to say a couple of things. One is people, I don't know if people know that one of our 3 core visionary goals besides shared prosperity and social equity is cultural richness. And we lifted that as a goal because we really believe that an innovation city like Cambridge should have arts and culture in its DNA. That is what sparks creativity, which sparks imagination, which sparks innovation. And working with many of you on this screen, as I see, we did launch a fund last year called the Cultural Capital Fund, when we recognized 20 visionaries in Cambridge, people who had been at the forefront of arts locally, nationally, and internationally. And, as I look at all of this conversation and I hear this conversation about the venues, and I think also building on Marion's idea of having art everywhere, the thing that comes to my mind is, we have to have the resources, we have to build this endowment for Cambridge that can continue to support the arts. It was great to see that the city increased the budget for Cambridge Arts, but it's really nothing compared to what we really need for a city that actually lives on innovation. And so my hope is, and we actually brainstormed a lot of ideas at the Mayor's Task Force about how to generate more income for the arts. And I'd love to see a little more energy put behind those so that we can support our local artists, we can support our arts organizations. They've been hammered by COVID. They've literally, I mean, we are reviewing proposals and we are seeing, even world music, for instance, how much revenue was lost, how much of the gains that people had made are gone. And so I think there's a real impetus a push that we all need to put behind how do we generate more resources to support our arts, to support the artists, to have arts everywhere in our community, for our children, for healing, for economic development, for so many things that need to happen in the community. So I look forward to working with all of you, to making sure that we have the resources, that we can build a solid endowment that is there for Cambridge, not for now, but for the future as well. I'm done. Marian is shy.
Sorry, Eric, please.
Thank you. This is really inspiring, all the work, Starlight Lounge and the theater in Kendall, Cambridge Community Foundation's work and the city's work. I just had a question, and I grew up in Cambridge, so seeing this come to life is really amazing, and keep prospering, and hope it continues growing. My question was for Sal, because I've been a long time member of Global Arts Live, formerly World Music, and I'm just wondering if you're able to talk more about the relationship, because I remember talking to the founder, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago about having a home for the theater, and so it's kind of cool to see that maybe happening, and I'd be curious if there's more to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's out there, it's public. We made an announcement. I'm assuming you're talking about Maury Aronson. So we've been talking with Maury and Connie, their new executive director, quite a bit lately. The plan is, as you noted, Global Arts Live has always operated in other venues. They've been a Cambridge-based organizations in Central Square for over 20 years, but program spaces outside of Cambridge, Boston, and surrounding towns. So the arrangement that we've crafted with Global Arts Live is that Global Arts Live is going to program around 100 nights within the theater. This is that plus or minus 360 seat venue in the building. But then they're also going to be part of the operational entity. So the entity that ultimately operates this space is going to be separate from Global Arts Live, but the members of the Global Arts team will be involved. They'll be responsible for managing the venue for the balance of the nights outside of the 100 nights that Global Arts Live will program it. So it was really hopefully it ends up being a match made in heaven, but we were really happy to have Maury express interest in running the space, and also to commit to meeting all the diversity requirements, sustainability requirements, and all the other commitments that we made to the city and the community throughout the process. So yeah, he's looking forward to opening the doors in 25.
Thank you for providing them a home, and I would just urge people to look in the chat also and write a letter to continue Starlight Lounge. Thanks.
Thanks. Jason, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. I was listening to the comments that Geeta made and the comments that Marian made, and I just wanted to say, man, do I love the Cambridge Club, because you're spot on with those comments. Thinking about innovation economy for 2 decades now, we've talked about the innovation economy in Cambridge, and we stopped with eds and meds. Our universities, our education, and life science and technology. And, doggone it, we all know on this call that artists and creatives are part of that. And creativity is the envelope that makes all of that possible, whether you're working in a lab or whether you're working in an artist studio. And so, we developed a program a number of years ago, and to what Marian was saying about Yamba, which I'm also very excited about, both in Central and Harvard Square. we created a program called Creative Marketplace. And the whole idea was, we've got all these artists in Cambridge and creatives, and we've got all these corporate environments. How do we sort of hack that system and make sure that our artists and our technologists and life scientists actually connect, and that folks in those spaces get to see artwork and get to see what's happening, because we know most of the world is not invited into those spaces. And so how do we enliven those common spaces with local artist work? And so we've got about 25 partnerships that we've done in law firms, medical device makers, Work Bar, WeWork, and on and so forth, where you can actually see local artists work and get to know them and get to know what they do and recognize creativity and innovation, not just from technology and life science, but across all of this work. So I'm just really happy to hear that piece of the conversation get lifted up. I'm grateful for that.
Me too. This is a great group. Questions? Any last questions?
I had a question for Sal. Sal, I know you started to design the building much before COVID. What kind of changes did you have to make in response to COVID or similar things that might happen in the future?
Yeah, we talked about that a lot. I mean, I honestly think it changes, by the month. We've thought about, I think we've, went from one end of the spectrum at the extreme level to how we can make the space work for the future. And then have thought about how COVID is eventually going to become the norm, and wondered whether we should make any changes and whether those changes will be applicable in the future. At this point, we've been thinking just a lot about ventilation and making sure that we have adequate ventilation in the theater, and a little bit more than what would normally be accommodated in a space like this. So, but I think it changes. I mean, COVID. I think there's still a lot of unknowns out there, and it'll probably continue to change until we break ground on the project.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sal.
Kathy, can I ask a quick question that I hope is quick and has a quick answer? And it's a question for Jason, which is, do you have a sense, Jason, in terms of the impact of COVID, the gains and losses in terms of what's closed and isn't coming back versus new opportunities for arts presentation, and for those of us who play the audience to enjoy, how that imbalance has worked out?
Yeah, Maggie, that's such a great question. And I would say, the simple answer is no, we don't have a gauge yet. As many of us were talking about, maybe in the breakout rooms, the world is starting to re-engage, and we don't quite know what that's going to look like yet. We don't know. I mean, we know most folks are surviving, but what does that mean in this context? And I raised my hand on my thing because I wanted to shout out Sal because he's too humble to say it, but we, for a solid year and a half, with the guidance of the vice mayor and many other folks, created an arts reopening advisory committee, and basically had calls on the weekly basis with the leadership for most of the arts organizations in Central Square and more farther afield in the city, to talk about what folks would need, what they were dealing with, what did things look like, on the daily, on the weekly, and how were they going to begin to think about, clawing back to re-engaging with audiences in person, or how they were engaging with folks, digitally and through platforms like Zoom. We know that some folks were very successful with that and actually found audiences that they never knew they had or had access to. Many folks, did digital galas and other types of performance. Passine, never stopped doing the work that they do, and were enormously successful with that, with audiences that weren't in the room and that were broader than, what might have happened if we'd just gone back to business as usual. And so I think, in partnership with the State Arts Agency, in partnership with the city, with the foundation through the Cultural Capital Fund that Geeta mentioned, we're really trying to learn, and we're trying to figure this out, because I don't think any of us quite know what's going to happen next. But we've done everything. I mean, we're lucky enough, all of us, to live and work in a city and be part of Cambridge. And we know Cambridge has been able to do more than any other city in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. A hard stop, financially and otherwise, to support our arts and nonprofit organizations, support our restaurants, our business and retail, you know, our neighborhood and community-based organizations. I mean, it's just really extraordinary. But we also know it's not enough. And so we're having those conversations around ARPA funding over the next several years. We're having those conversations, you know, as we continue. But what I was going to say, Sal very kindly joined our Arts Advisory Reopening Committee to talk about what was biomed and what was sort of the lab space and life science community thinking about, because they were well ahead of everybody else when it came to ventilation, when it came to, you know, how do we deal with these things? And so we were really able to leverage that great experience and knowledge that was right on the cutting edge of what do we do next as part of that conversation. So I think, again, you know, I would say, and to Amy's great point, you know, it's all about the collaboration. We have every possible resource in Cambridge we could humanly imagine. And it's not just dollars on the table. And when we come together, we find solutions that wouldn't happen any other place and that will actually guide other communities in how to come out of the pandemic. So we don't know exactly, Maggie, but I think, you know, we're definitely going to be on the vanguard of understanding and figuring that out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank all of our panelists tonight, Jason, Sal, Amy, Michael. Thank you all for being here and presenting to us, and for all of your work to keep Cambridge a vital city, to grow us as a vital city. We're all appreciative and recognize, I think, the importance of the arts. It's dinner time, everyone. I think we got to get off, but I will look forward to seeing you in person, April 11th. We're really working hard to make it safe. And we'll be in touch soon about that program. Thank you so much. And I'll look forward to seeing you in person soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.